So good afternoon. My name is Ben Walsh. I'm the mayor of the city of Syracuse. So for those of you that are visiting from outside of the city, welcome. Happy to have you here. I couldn't think of a better day to be snuggled up talking about monuments rather than to be outside right now. So happy to be snuggled in with all of you. I'd like to thank Carrie for bringing us all together. I mentioned to her during lunch, this is therapeutic for me, and I hope it is for many of you. Oftentimes in our respective roles, we feel isolated, and this is a reminder for me. Is while our circumstances in Syracuse are certainly unique in our own right, as I try to remind our team often. Cities and communities all around the world have grappled with all the same issues that we're grappling with, and there's a lot to learn. And I think what also we heard was that this has been going on for a long time. And so, Carrie, thank you for the therapy and for bringing us all together. And ultimately for creating this opportunity for dialogue. And really that's the central message to my presentation, is the importance of dialogue in working through conflict resolution on topics related to monuments, but many others as well. So, for those of you that may not be familiar with our local case study here, the reason I'm speaking is because we have our own contested monument here, and that is the Columbus Monument. So a little bit of history. Our Columbus Monument is located in what is still formerly known as St. Mary's Circle, but ultimately since the monument has been erected, is known as Columbus Circle. It was dedicated in 1934, and as is the case with many monuments like it, the monument was erected really as the result of organizing among primarily the local Italian-American community as a project of pride, but also to overcome the oppression and marginalization that they focused, or that they had to deal with as a community. And so many local Italian-Americans donated to erect this monument. And as you can imagine, many of the family members of those that were a part of erecting and dedicating this monument are still very much involved in this debate. Now contrast that with the fact that this monument, as is the case where we stand today, is on the ancestral land of the Onondaga Nation. You heard a little bit from Brandon about the history of the nation and the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. We are the capital of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. That is significant. And so that is a significant contrast that we are grappling with as we address this monument. And beyond that, as a community, we are an incredibly diverse community here in the city of Syracuse. We are a proud refugee resettlement community. This last census, our population grew for the first time in 70 years, and much of that was based on the fact that we are a proud refugee resettlement community. So we are very, very diverse. I intentionally included this particular image because it was an image that we pulled off of the Onondaga Nation website, and I think it's important because it shows that we all look at things, including monuments, through different lenses. And this is a critical lens in which people of the Onondaga Nation and the Haudenosaunee view this monument. The heads represented, while initially were intended to recognize the people that were here before us, the actual individuals or heads represented on this monument are representative, actually, indigenous peoples of the plains, not here in Syracuse and the Onondaga Nation. So I wanted to recognize that. I also wanted to recognize the location of the monument in Columbus Circle, surrounded by amazing historical architecture and significant civic architecture, actually the Civic Center, but also the county courthouse, the Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception. So this is a prominent public space in the city of Syracuse. And actually, again, in the spirit of not reinventing the wheel and knowing that other communities have gone through this, I had a chance to talk to former New Orleans Mayor Mitch Landrieu about our situation here in Syracuse. And one of the things that he really got me thinking about, and the point that he made, was how sacred these public spaces are, and how we have limited public spaces. And so we really do need to be thoughtful and intentional about what is represented within those spaces. And just because somebody got there first or put something up there first doesn't necessarily mean that is what should continue to represent and reflect our community. So as I alluded to, this monument, as is the case with many, is a subject of deep divide, and for some important reasons. Again, providing context, recognizing that the divide that exists here in this community is not new. Some might want to, some do suggest that it is, and will quickly point to what we as a country went through back in 2020 after the murder of George Floyd. They'll point to the Black Lives Matter movement and suggest that this issue, this controversy, and ultimately the decisions that I've made was a flash in the pan, something that was reactive to a specific moment. We know that that's not the case. This specific monument has been controversial from the moment, or even before it was erected, including around things like location. This monument, for those of you that are familiar with Syracuse, originally was proposed to go in Upper Onondaga Park, not too far from where I live. There's actually a monument of a goat there now, for what that's worth. Then there was a debate and discussion that wasn't necessarily the right place. The Syracuse Planning Commission made a number of recommendations, and at one point, the Columbus Monument, or I think it was the Memorial Association at the time, identified Fayette Park, which we call Firefighters Park, where an existing monument stood and still stands, the Hamilton White Monument. And not surprisingly, when they proposed to replace that monument with their monument, that was controversial. And the family and friends of Hamilton White pushed back, and so ultimately it didn't go there. It ended up in St. Mary's Circle, and that's where it stands today. Again, I think it's important to recognize the very personal nature of this monument and of this topic. Individuals, including current members of the Columbus Monument Corporation, their fathers were involved in fundraising in erecting this statue. It is deeply personal for them, and that weighs heavily upon me as I consider this issue. This is a matter of family pride and history, and again, happened at a time when their family themselves were facing oppression. So I don't take that lightly. I don't think anyone should. It's significant. But again, the opinions of some of those individuals and of the Columbus Monument Corporation do not represent the opinions of all Italian Americans. We have many different groups, including one, the Women of Italian and Syracuse Heritage, or WISH, that represents a different perspective. I think it's important that none of these groups are monolithic and have a diverse set of opinions, and that is certainly the case here in Syracuse, and is worthy of recognizing. So, how have we tried to grapple with this issue and ultimately work through conflict resolution? I mentioned I am a big proponent of dialogue as a means to work through conflict. We have one of the best organizations that I've ever encountered when it comes to teaching and supporting dialogue, Interfaith Works. I know Beth Broadway's here, the executive director of Interfaith Works, and we approached Beth, knowing that this was a controversial issue, and asked if they would be willing to conduct dialogue circles so we could begin to work through these issues. Dialogue helps develop empathy, understanding, and healing. I can't overstate the significance and the importance of healing in this for all parties involved. And we believe that the dialogue circles that we conducted, going back to the first year I was in office in 2018, began, I believe, while we still haven't resolved this issue, began that healing process that continues today. Looking back on those circles, I will tell you, if you were to ask me in 2017 when I was running for mayor, do I think that I would have made a decision to begin a path towards removing the statue, I would have said no. But that speaks to the power of the dialogue circles, and sitting through some of those and talking, and more importantly, listening, seeing people's tears dripping down their face, listening to the passion, the history. I learned a lot in this process, and again, I think that's a critical element of this is the importance of learning history and different aspects and perspectives of history. But ultimately, that was the foundation by which we developed the path forward that I'll talk about momentarily. After we did a number of dialogue circles, ultimately I felt that it was important to make a decision about the future of the monument. We established a Columbus Action Committee to help me do that. It involved individuals that had been involved in the dialogue circles, and ultimately they made a series of recommendations, some of which we are included within our path forward. Once we made the decision about the path that we wanted to take, we have established a Heritage Park Advisory Commission and Italian American Task Force, which I'll talk about their specific roles. But again, throughout the process, each step very intentional, each rooted in dialogue, and ultimately bringing people together to work through these challenges. So, the path forward. Ultimately, I did make a determination to begin a path that would require us to follow state and local requirements, but ultimately to remove and relocate the statue, and to create a new public space. Now, there's a few things that I want to note before I finish describing the path forward and wrap up. One, I want to read to you, if I can find it, the statement that the Onondaga Nation put out around the time that, right before the decision was made. It reads, "We fully understand," this is just a section of the statement, "we fully understand the wishes of the Italian American community to honor their heritage, but it is burdensome for the people of Onondaga to see Christopher Columbus memorialized with a statue. Within our lands and hearts, finding equality and peace is difficult, knowing the hardships our ancestors endured as a consequence of his campaign. Our own monuments, beautiful lakes, streams, rivers, and the earth itself has suffered greatly as a direct result of the doctrine of discovery to which Columbus used to claim the lands in the name of the Spanish crown." So while I believe that our path forward reflects a significant amount of compromise based on the different perspectives, ultimately that statement reflects why I felt it was important that as part of that compromise, as part of that path forward, it involved the relocation of the statue. Now again, I want to be clear because oftentimes in the debate it's not. We're proposing to preserve and protect the statue as a piece of art, not destroy it. We are proposing to relocate it to allow for it to be viewed publicly in private space, not public space, and not erase history, but tell a fuller story. We've agreed the plan is to maintain honor of Italian Americans in the center of that circle because we know that that's an important space for that community, but to establish a heritage park around it that more broadly represents and celebrates the diversity of our community and also acknowledges the oppression that other parts of our community have gone through. Ultimately, once announcing that path forward, the Columbus Monument Corporation did file suit, and the issue has been litigated. There was a Supreme Court judge ruling that supported their initial petition. Ultimately, we appealed and were successful in our appeal with the state appellate court, which essentially says that, again, we have a specific path to go down that has local and state requirements. We intend to go down that path, but it is a path toward the end that I described. As I wrap up, I just want to share, we are not a case study in how to do this successfully because it's still very much underway. There was a rally this morning down at the statue, and there'll be a ceremony on Monday. There's an Indigenous Peoples Day that is being held tomorrow at the Everson. So this is very much real time. But I do believe that we are going to continue to heal as a community. I do believe that we are going to end up with a space that appropriately celebrates the great diversity of our community. And I believe that because of the tenets that we will continue to adhere to through this process. Being empathetic, being respectful, and being truthful. So as we continue down that path, hopefully this real-time case study gives you some perspective as to how we are applying what we've learned and what we continue to learn from all of you right here in Syracuse. So thank you all for your time, and we'll look forward to answering questions. I forgot to go to the last slide, but it just is our website. So if you want to learn more about our process, our website is www.syr.gov. There we go. There it is. /heritage-park. Okay, thanks.
I have a question. Sure. I'm just wondering because I couldn't help but notice the parallels in our presentation, and I was just thinking a little bit about the strategies that I've been employing to kind of produce community, right? How do you manage like these discussion circles, like when you don't have that kind of seriality? Like I'm meeting with my students over and over and over again, setting up their ground rules, guidelines. Like, can you talk a little bit about how you facilitate these?
Well, there are a lot of parallels, and I was thinking that that your classroom does very much kind of reflect what we saw in those dialogue circles. When you have kind of rules of engagement and a sense of community, which may not have existed at the beginning of those dialogue circles, but certainly existed at the end of those dialogue circles, I think it makes it much more conducive to the type of necessary dialogue and difficult discussions that you have. And so I think one of the challenges has been for us here in Syracuse, because a number of the individuals that are members of the Columbus Monument Corporation were part of those dialogue circles. And while they may have never necessarily been in full agreement, they abided by those rules of engagement and participated in that process. We have not been able to replicate that to a great extent in the public realm. And so I think that that is something that I aspire to, and I think that my hope is maybe if we can remove the litigation aspect of it, it opens up a space and an opportunity for us to re-engage, but it's been hard.
Thank you.
I don't have a question, but I thought that your presentation did a wonderful job of reinforcing what education is all about. And that idea of having a safe space where you can talk about difficult things. And so I applaud you for encouraging that.
I do want to acknowledge, I'm sorry, I'm just going to talk. But people take issue with the framework of a safe space, right? And I do want to just hold space for that idea here too, that I pushed back on my students a little bit, and I didn't go into it here in the interest of time, but remember, your sense of safety is not necessarily what everyone else is experiencing. And so if we could work together to open up open lines of dialogue so that we can help bring people into that same space, right? Which is incredibly difficult, as you know, it's incredibly difficult. But just to, those reminders of that, so.
Other questions?
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for all these presentations, and it made me think a lot about a few things. I think most, but certainly not all of the pain that about celebrating Columbus has to do with the death and destruction that his campaigns wrought. And I don't know if there were many, if any, benevolent explorers, kings, queens, or even popes. And they all believed in manifest destiny, and they acted accordingly. I believe that the most egregious outcome of celebrating Columbus has been the attempted erasure of Native people. Now, those of you who are here this morning to hear Brandon Lazar, I hope would agree that if we all knew the story that he told about the Haudenosaunee, their creation story, and their contribution to our form of democracy, where women picked the leaders, that we would all be better off. So my question is, how do we get there, and how do we make the story of the Haudenosaunee as present as the story of Columbus?
Well, I know the answer. No, I just wanted to offer, I had one of the more powerful moments in my life came shortly after I was elected, and I had a chance to sit down with Onondaga Nation Faithkeeper Oren Lyons and Tadadaho Sid Hill. And I asked them, not quite that question, but basically what can I do, what can we do to be a good neighbor? And their response was, learn our history. So to your point, I think, for those of you that learn from Brandon today, I think it's incumbent upon all of us to learn more. And the more we learn, hopefully the more it influences how we govern and how we operate as a society.
I will piggyback off that real quick. I'll just share that just Thursday, I was talking about Andrew Jackson in my class, and I have some senior auditors. And one of my senior auditors was like, best president. And then the other students in my class were like, what? like what? Excuse me? So we had a little dialogue about that. This senior auditor just wrote to me this weekend and said, I took the time to look up more about Andrew Jackson, and I realized that my education in that was of a different moment, a different generation. There was so much I didn't know. And she said, I've changed my perspective on this, right? And so to kind of cement what you're saying, right, I don't want to be Pollyannish, but this is the way forward, right? It's just to kind of in every way, in every space, work at those historical truths, so.
And I suppose my approach is related, in that we have to know that history, because it doesn't make as much sense.
Yeah.
It's not as meaningful.
My name is Lisa Moore, and I'm the Executive Director of the Onondaga Historical Association, and we also operate the Scano Great Law of Peace. We do have some of Brandon's artwork there. And if it reassures you, I think every day for the next foreseeable future, we have 4th graders, 7th graders, 10th graders from school districts all over the county and the region coming to the center, and they learn very much what you've heard this morning from Brandon, but also they learn about the subsequent experiences of our indigenous people at the hands of the doctrine of discovery. So I know we have a lot of people who have spent most of their lives not knowing this history, but I hope it comforts you, and I hope you come to experience that at the center and understand how many students are coming through our doors, including from Catholic schools and other religious organizations.
I was actually waving to someone in the back, but I do have something to say. My name is Cindy Scolacci. I'm with Neighbors of the Onondaga Nation, an ally group that any of you who are from the area, please look us up and join the organization. We have a 3-hour educational program called Witness to Injustice that teaches about colonialization and the doctrine of discovery from the time of Columbus up until what is currently happening. The Onondaga County Library System wrote a grant. They have offered 3 free programs to our community. In December, there'll be a social dance also. The next one is at Onondaga Hill Library. It is open and free to the public, so I am inviting everyone to call and register for it.
Thanks. I think we have a question up here, sir.
I will also just say, as you're moving your way up, that my participation in the Witness to Injustice process was very impactful as well, and the path we took forward. So thank you for that.
Hi, everyone. Mayor Watch, you're getting all the attention, but I think that's just understandable. You mentioned the idea of a heritage park, which is an interesting concept, but it in of itself might become a contested space, because then whose heritage is going to be represented there? I guess the answer is that this is going to be a contained space like the classroom for people to come to learn about each other and come to some kind of, if not consensus, but reconciliation. But have you thought about this? Or when you say a park, it means that it's not just going to be Columbus. It's probably going to be
Right.
other monuments. And
Yeah.
I wonder what the idea is.
Yes, we've thought quite a bit about it, and again, for those of you that aren't familiar with the space, you have kind of the circle where the monument is, and then there's a space where a building previously existed, just kind of adjacent to it, that we've begun designing for a heritage park concept. Now, our ultimate vision is for those spaces to kind of operate together. But to your point, yeah, that's something we've engaged a local landscape architecture and design firm, EDR. They're extremely talented. They're developing concepts. We kind of realized early on that trying to be all things to all communities was essentially impossible, and so can we design, so we've erred more on kind of a more simplistic design and that focuses on kind of what we all share in common in terms of, based on some Haudenosaunee principles and in terms of the earth and where we come from. But we haven't figured it out yet. It's really, really hard.
I think we had a question here, and then this gentleman here, and ma'am, if we have time, we're going to come up to you.
Thank you. I'm Beth Broadway from Interfaith Works, and Mayor, thank you for the shout out. That was kind. This is quite a process that we're in here in our community, and I do think it's important that it's taken a long time. It isn't the toppling of the Saddam Hussein, in a minute kind of a thing, or done without community participation. But I've heard a lot in this process that we're in that, this is just a moment in time. And this moment will go away. This lefty, trauma-informed, people trying to be kind to each other, all of the things that you're talking about, right? And golly, won't it be great when we can get back to normal? And of course, we do see this like kind of violent speech coming out of one of the presidential candidates. And so, I think it's bigger than the monuments, what we're talking about here. I think it's bigger about how we really save our humanity on this planet. And I would love to hear our speakers, and I'm not trying to do it as an academic question because I'm a very practical woman, as you know, but I think it's a critical moment, and the monuments are emblematic of this kind of fight to save our humanity on the planet. I'd love to hear your comments about that.
Small question.
That's a huge question, and I think, since 2001, I've been thinking about this. When I saw that Saddam Hussein image come down, and it resonated with me because I saw one of those things being manufactured, and I think that's why I'm gravitating towards this topic. It comes down to education. I mean, that is what it is as far as I'm concerned. But I'm an educator, so I'm obviously biased. But the more people know about things, the more they are able to process them and to understand. And so much of the vitriol comes from fear. It guides so much. And so I think diffusing that is what we're trying to do in different ways and in different circumstances.
I didn't know that I even remotely have an answer to this question, but I will share with you where my head is right now. And I completely agree with Sally, but I also think about how the work that we have to do as the practitioners of this, right, as the people who are doing the educating, doing the advocacy, doing all of that, right, and how can we care for ourselves, and how can we model this kind of kindness in ourselves and in interactions with others. And I know that's abstract and really kind of like pie in the sky, but when I think about trauma-informed workplaces as opposed to just classrooms, right? It's really about opening up lines of communication, dialogue, being vulnerable, being able to be vulnerable. And I think, I'll let Sally take the content of the teaching piece, but there's something there about our own care and kindness and attention to ourselves too, and the way that we work through the world, that I think it's also something we can control, right? I can't snap my fingers and make these things go away, and I can't snap my fingers and wish my students felt differently, but I can control how I interact, respond, and navigate that.
And our forum is also one of privilege. You know, these students, they are in university, and that, yeah, it's a fishbowl in a lot of ways.
Thank you all. My name's Andy Major. I'm a colleague of Cindy's and others with Neighbors of the Onondaga Nation, and wanted to let you know that this morning, in addition to the Save the Statue rally, there was also a significant group of us trying to do more truth-telling with a big banner that said, Columbus didn't discover anything. You can't discover something where people live and have lived for centuries. But also sort of trying to point a path forward with a big sign that said, decolonize Syracuse. And I think it's a kind of fancy academic way of saying we need to re-educate, we need to rethink, we need to understand what was here before Europeans stumbled upon these shores. And so I do want to express deep appreciation, Ben, for the courageous act you've taken. And it's sad that although there has been this real effort at dialogue, and Beth and Interfaith Works have played a key role in that, but if you listen to what the Columbus Monument folks say, they say there was no talk, there was no conversation. They refused to acknowledge that they were invited into this process. They participated at least in parts of it until they realized that they weren't necessarily going to easily get their way. And then they backed out, and that's a shame. But that shouldn't stop us from moving forward to do what's right. And my one other thought is, in thinking about what the gentleman over there said, that I continue to have a discomfort at the idea of fully centering Italians in the circle, and thinking if we're going to center anyone, and maybe there doesn't need to be a center, but if we're going to center a culture, it should be Onondaga. Thanks.
Thank you.
You're the last one.
Hi. Yeah. Julie Ehrlich from the Mellon Foundation. Thank you, all three of you. I have a question for you, Mayor Walsh, and it piggybacks a little bit off of what you said, Beth. And the question I have is, so acknowledging how long and hard and expensive it is to do a process like the one you've done with the discussion circles, how, if at all, do you think about whether it translates outside of the area of the topic of contested monuments? Like, do you think about how a process like that might be, whether, and if so, how, it might be useful in addressing other issues that are hard for people to come together around, of which there are too many to list? So would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. Oh, no, it has. I think I already kind of did subscribe to what we would call deliberative democracy, but that experience for me solidified it. And for anyone that spends time with me, especially my senior staff, Greg Lowe's here, who's been with me every step of the way, our department heads. That's whenever possible, whenever time allows. I think engaging, listening to different perspectives, surrounding yourself with different people that do look at problems and look at the world through different lenses, and taking that all into consideration when you make important decisions. It's central to the way in which I govern, and I think can and should be central to the way in which we as a community, as a society, tackle a lot of challenging issues. So, to your point, this is just one. There are many. Thank you. Thank you.